colleagues do on this panel, it's Donald Trump, baby.
Yep.
It's all about Donald Trump, right? The old pivot. We're not going to talk about what's going on in Somalia and not going to talk about what's going on in Minnesota with this massive fraud scandal. We're going to talk about Donald Trump. With my remaining seconds, can we play the video I have, Mr. Chairman?
The moment that hearing changed wasn't when people started arguing, it was when the video started playing. Democrats were calling concerns about fraud racist and xenophobic until receipts hit the screen. Suddenly, the room got quiet, and the entire conversation shifted fast. What started as accusations of bigotry turned into uncomfortable questions about taxpayer money, alleged fraud, and even claims that stolen funds were circling back into politics. Instead of backing down, Republicans pushed harder, and what came next left the room completely divided.
Of course, comes after weeks of viral videos from a young man YouTuber who was literally creeping around daycares by himself, making claims about fraud that were not there. And then the vice president and the FBI director were retweeting these videos without even verifying if they were true. So we're not accusing people of being xenophobic and racist. They are being xenophobic and racist, including the President of the United States. And I want to say, for one, that I stand with the Somali and the immigrant community standing here today.
Mr. Hudson, are you just hearing from Republicans on this, or are Democrat constituents like, oh my God, I'm struggling to put my kids in school, struggling to make ends meet, and my tax dollars are being robbed by people, and then they're sending it all over the place, and this is complete fraud. What is going on, and why hasn't anything been done about it?
I'll give you a personal example. So my family, my in-laws in particular, are politically diverse. A lot of them vote for Democrats, and they're fairly apolitical. They're not like me, all plugged in. And so I kind of use them as a bellwether for what the people are thinking. Across the board, everybody is upset about this fraud.
And I'm guessing when you guys bring this up, whether it's to the Waltz administration, whether it's to the AG, the number one thing that comes back at you is you're a racist, you're a white supremacist, or you're an Islamophobe. As we've seen Governor Waltz now trying to answer for these questions, he's doing it at the national level. Do you guys hear the same thing at the state level as well?
Yes, absolutely. They always pivot to the divisive. As I stated in my opening statement, it's diversion, right? We're going to talk about personalities. We're going to talk about partisan politics. We're going to find some way to get people yelling at each other rather than looking at the problem.
Or, like you've heard my colleagues do on this panel, it's Donald Trump, baby.
Yep.
It's all about Donald Trump, right? The old pivot. We're not going to talk about what's going on in Somalia and not going to talk about what's going on in Minnesota with this massive fraud scandal. We're going to talk about Donald Trump. With my remaining seconds, can we play the video I have, Mr. Chairman?
horta aad iyo aadaan ugu faraxsanahay in maanta safaari aan soo gaarnay sida dadka badan ay u og yihiin ciyaalkeena yaryar ilaa iyo number la eg 20 milyan oo ciyaal iskooley ah waxay cuntadooda ka helaan iskoolka kaliyo marka waxaan fursad u helnay in aan sharci soo gudbino oo la dhahayo Meals Act oo u fududeynayo in waqtigaanay pandemic aan ku jirno oo dhalinyarada iskoolka aynan joogin oo guryahooda ay joogaan aynan gaajoonin oo familkoodi wili ay fursad u helaan in cunto ay helaan oo meelo qaarkood laga qaybinayo ay cuntada ka soo qaadan karaan marka aadaan ugu mahad celinaya safari in ay tahay meelaha city oo diyaarinayo cunto maalin kasto dhalinyarada ciyaalkii iyo familkoodina ku taakuleynayo cuntada city maalintii kaliyo safari waxay cunto siisaa 2300 oo ciyaal ah iyo familkooda taas waa mid muhiim ah sida aad u ogtihiin dhalinyaro badan gaajo ku nool wadankaanayti ama familkooda fursad u helin in quraac qada iyo casho ay siiso marka in qadadaasaytii ay meel ka helaan aad ay u muhiimsan tahay bishan ramadaanka oo familiyaalkeena badan iyagoo aan shaqo haysanin iyagoo aan taakulayn kale helaynin in aynan ka walwalin ciyaalkooda yaryar sidii ay qado ku siin lahaayeen waa muhiim marka waxaan u mahad celinayaa safaariyo kaleete iyo dadka badan oo maalin Ilaahay keeno fursad u qaatay in ay u volunteer gareeyaan oo ay taakuleeyaan familiyaalka
One thing that is so alarming is the reporting that many of these fraudulent companies are then donating the stolen money back to the same Democrats that are protecting them and advocate for these very programs. Is that correct, Mr. Hudson?
I would agree with that statement.
Well, we just had one of my Democrat colleagues said these are just opinions. Do you know, are these guys donating money back to Democrats?
Yes, they are.
I'd like to enter into the record, Mr. Chairman, an article from Breitbart News saying, with the title being Database Searches Show Somali Fraudsters Funding Democrat Politicians. So these aren't opinions.
Without objection.
There's actually reporting on this. Are you guys aware? You guys are elected officials in Minnesota, right? Are you guys aware of the reporting that some of the stolen money is getting funneled back to the Islamic terror group Al-Shabaab in Somalia? Mr. Robbins?
Yes, sir. And we have evidence of it going back as far as 2012, where a man was convicted of sending $21,000 to Al-Shabaab. In 2011, 2 Minnesota women were convicted of sending money to different groups. Someone else.
What happened in this hearing felt like a perfect snapshot of modern American politics. Because the moment serious questions were raised about alleged fraud tied to Minnesota programs, the conversation changed instantly. Not toward accountability, not toward investigation, toward accusations. Almost immediately, concerns about missing taxpayer money were met with familiar labels: xenophobia, racism, Islamophobia. And if you've watched politics long enough, you probably recognize the pattern. The argument suddenly stops being about what happened and becomes about whether you're allowed to ask the question at all. That was the tension hanging over this entire exchange. Democrats argued that viral claims surrounding fraud had been exaggerated, fueled by questionable online reporting and amplified before being fully verified. Some lawmakers defended immigrant communities, warning against unfair generalizations and dangerous rhetoric. But Republicans weren't backing down. Instead, they pivoted right back to one issue: the money. Representative Eli Crane pressed witnesses with a simple question. Forget party politics for a second. Were ordinary people, including Democrats, angry about allegations that taxpayer dollars had been stolen? And the answer surprised some people. Yes. According to testimony, frustration wasn't partisan. Families struggling to pay bills, parents trying to afford childcare, everyday people wondering how government programs could allegedly lose millions while officials seemed more focused on political arguments than answers. And that's where things escalated. Because Republicans argued every time questions about fraud surfaced, the response wasn't transparency, it was deflection. Talk about Donald Trump, change the subject, attack motives, anything except staying focused on the allegations themselves. Then came the moment people started talking about afterward: the video. The room had been loud, heated, partisan, but when the footage started playing, everything changed. And for a second, there was something Washington rarely experiences: silence. Because whether someone agreed with the claims or not, visuals change things. Allegations suddenly feel more real when evidence, receipts, or testimony starts appearing on screen. Then the conversation moved into even more explosive territory: political donations. Questions were raised about whether individuals connected to alleged fraud operations had donated money to Democratic politicians. Republicans argued this wasn't speculation, that records and reporting pointed toward real financial connections. Now, to be clear, allegations alone aren't proof of wrongdoing. That matters. But critics argued something important. If taxpayer money is being misused and political figures connected to those systems are receiving donations from people involved, shouldn't that at least deserve investigation? That's a fair question regardless of political party. Then came another disturbing topic: references to prior criminal cases involving money sent overseas to extremist groups, including Al-Shabaab. Witnesses pointed to past convictions involving individuals from Minnesota accused of sending funds abroad. And suddenly, the hearing stopped feeling like another partisan shouting match. Because now the issue wasn't just fraud, it was oversight, accountability, and potentially national security. Meanwhile, critics of the hearing argued there's a real danger in unfairly targeting immigrant communities based on isolated crimes or allegations, and that concern matters too, because responsible oversight shouldn't become collective blame. But supporters of the investigation pushed back hard. They argued asking where taxpayer money goes is not racism, demanding accountability is not xenophobia, and investigating fraud is not hate. By the end of the hearing, something felt obvious. The biggest disagreement wasn't just about missing money, it was about the rules of public debate itself. Can people question government programs without being labeled? Can fraud concerns be investigated without politics immediately taking over? And maybe most importantly, when uncomfortable questions get asked, do leaders respond with answers or accusations? Because what stood out most wasn't the arguing, it was the silence after the evidence hit the screen. And sometimes in Washington, silence tells you more than the shouting ever could.